Hey you guys, I recently purchased this new table saw. It's a saw stop, 3 horsepower, and well, I just realized that none of my jigs are fitting on my new table saw. I apologize for the background noise, but I have the laser going in the background doing some work. So anyway, none of my jigs are working on this table saw, and I rely heavily on my table saw sleds. In the past, I have made my own sleds out of 3/4 inch MDF, like this one over here. I have one for 90 degrees and one for 45-degree cuts. This one, as you can see, has 2 blade cuts in it, and that is because it was set up for my DeWalt contractor saw that I used to have. And then when I got this one and I realized my jigs were not working, I tried to adjust this one to fit on these miters. These miters are a lot closer together than the job site table saw. So I went ahead and removed one of the runners and then placed it on the table saw, on the new table saw, and ran the jig through it. And somehow doing this, it got out of square. Now this sled used to be super square. I used the 5-cut method to check it, and I did make 3 table saw sleds until I got one perfect. But anyway, I cannot use my old table saw sled, so I'm going to put this one aside. And I decided before I start making a new one from scratch, why don't I try to see if I can find something out there on the market that will work without me having to build one. So I went to my local Rockler store and purchased this sled over here. And I don't know if it's any good, but I'm going to put it together and I'm going to test it, and we'll see together if this is something that, you know, if you are not good at building sleds or you're intimidated by it, maybe this is something that will fill that void and it's a good alternative. So I'm going to unbox it, put it together, and I'll see you back in a bit. So I unpacked the sled and it came already put together to my surprise. The only thing we need to attach is this plastic runners that goes in the back of the sled to you know, make it slide easier on the table. If you don't have some of this, even on your homemade jigs, I totally recommend it. I buy mine on Amazon. This is the brand I use. I'll put a link in the description below. Really good stuff. I also use it on the runners of drawers. If I make wood runners instead of using the metal rails, then I use those and help slide it a lot easier. So we need to put these guys on, and then the hold down clamp. Everything else is put together. Now after I unboxed it, I took the sled to my table and I put it on the miter slot, and it was too loose. It was wiggling left and right. It was not tight on the miter slot. Now this miter bar that comes attached to the sled, it was already assembled, attached, does have some adjustments. It has some set screws. It has 2, 4, 6 set screws. And then behind those set screws, there are tiny springs, and then it has this roller ball. And that when you push the set screw further into the slot, it will push that roller ball a little bit higher outside. And that will just make it fit better into your miter slots. However, after I pushed those set screws, all of them, all the way to the maximum, it was still not solid into the miter slot. It still had a little bit of wiggle room. So at this point, I was thinking maybe I will return the sled. Now, after looking around in my shop, I found this miter bar that I purchased for a different jig, and I've never ended up using it. And this one fits absolutely perfect into the miter slots of the table. But then I realized that the already pre-drilled holes that are on the jig, it would not match with the holes that are on the bar. I could drill new holes, but I thought maybe that was not the best idea. My next thought is to make a new runner out of wood and replace the metal runner with a wood runner, maybe from hard maple or something. But then I realized this miter, it's a little bit into a dado, like a very shallow dado, so it doesn't move. And I figure if I make my runner a little bit wider, it's probably not going to fit in there, and then I'll have to widen that dado. I wasn't sure that was the good solution either. So then what I ended up doing is I took one of the set screws from the miter. I unscrewed it completely. I pulled out the spring from it and the ball. And then I cut the spring in half. Well, first of all, I tried to use that spring fully to put it on a different slot right behind the other spring. So you have a ball, then two springs, and then the set screw. And I figured that will help it push the ball a little bit further. So I tried to do that with the full spring, and it was too much pressure. It just springed right back at me, and it flew across the shop. So then I found the spring, and I cut it in half. So now I've removed the spring from one of those adjustment holes, and I cut it in half. So now I had two halves of the spring. And what I did is I placed them right next to the other spring on this second slot over here, and then the second one over here. So now these two slots have an extra half a spring, and that was just enough to put pressure on it to make this miter perfectly tight into my slot. You see, it doesn't wiggle at all, like completely solid, and it still slides beautiful. So I had to make that adjustment. If you buy this sled and you find that it's too sloppy in your miter slot, then you can remove one of those springs, cut it in half, and add it to two of the other slots. So we did that. Now we have to put this tape for the sliding. So I'm going to do that. And as you can see, the sled goes over the blade because we will have to cut it with our blade. That way we'll have a zero clearance on that side. But first, let's make sure we attach this tape to make this slide more beautiful. Oops, my stop block, it's loose. So there's our tape. And let's see, where will we place this? This is where the blade is going to cut a chunk off. So maybe I'll place one of these tapes. Let's see. I'm gonna leave this one for later after we cut the sled. So there you go. Let's see if it runs more smoothly. Yes, I mean, it was running good before too, so. All right, that is gonna be good. We will need to square the fence, but first we have to cut part of the sled, and then we will square the fence in regards to our edge of the board. So here is a closer look at the sled. We have this place here where we'll put our hold down clamp. Then we have this beautiful scale here where we can pivot the fence so we can cut angle cuts for doing picture frames and so on. It does have a stop block, which I will be replacing. I do not like this stop block at all. And then on the back of the sled, you have a couple of knobs where you can slide the sacrificial fence as you need it. Then you have this knob which holds the fence into place, and this is the one that you release to pivot the fence. Then what I like about this sled is that it has this set screw over here. So in order to adjust the fence to make it completely square in regards to your blade, you can do micro adjustments using this pivot screw. So, if you're not perfectly square, you can just push it further or backwards. So now that we cut our jig, now we have pretty much a zero clearance because we cut all the way to the blade. I'm going to move my sled to the middle of the blade, something like this. And then I'm going to use a square and make sure that my fence is completely square. It looks perfectly square. Let me show you. So I might not need to adjust anything. Well, I might have to remove the phone so I can show you. So here is my blade and my square against the blade. Well, now it's not square, and that is because I bumped it with the tripod. The beauty of making YouTube. So now it's all the way to the set screw, and then here we can see it's completely square against the blade and the fence. We can also make some test cuts and adjust as needed. Now, like I said, I do not like this stop block, so I will be upgrading this. Let me just remove it. And I will be using this stop block from Bourbon Moth, one of my favorite YouTubers. And when you have a favorite YouTuber, you better support them. And that was my way of supporting him by buying his stop block. So there you go. Now we have a new stop block that I think it's a better quality and easier to adjust. I'm also going to use this square to make sure that I am square, and it looks like I am. So might be time to make a cut and check it for square. I am going to extend my fence past the blade because I wanted to not get tear out when I make cuts. I'm going to lower the blade because I do not need it to be that high anymore. Oops. And we are very, very, very square. No daylight anywhere. So now we have a working table saw sled that will allow us to safely cross-cut things, and it seems to be very accurate, and it was really easy to put together. So will I recommend it? Well, for the money, I think you are getting a really good quality sled. I cannot say that about all the Rockler sleds. I bought their mini sleds that are for tiny parts. I bought two of them to use, one for 90-degree cuts and one for 45 degrees, and both of those were not square, and there was no way to adjust the fence. It's just all built in one piece. So those I do not recommend, but this one, I think it is very, very good. Now this sled, I will only be able to cut 90 degrees, so straight on. But I will be purchasing another one and setting it up for 45 degrees because, well, I make boxes and stuff and I like to cut a lot of 45 degrees. So I will be purchasing one more of this and set it up for 45. But so far, very, very pleased with it. You guys will see this in my future videos because I will be using it. And if something goes wrong or it's not good, I will let you know. Now, I hope this was helpful to you and you learned something new. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Skylar Ewing, and I'll see you in my next video.